The stars twinkled against the black canvas of space as the large silver ship approached Earth. It was the year 2157, and humanity was about to experience its first contact with alien life. Dr. Alan Carter stood nervously in the observation deck of the International Space Station. His heart pounded in his chest. As the leading xenobiologist at the North American Space Agency, he had spent his entire career preparing for this moment. Now it was happening, and he couldn't believe his eyes. "They're actually here," he whispered to himself, adjusting his glasses. The alien ship was unlike anything humans had ever built. It moved with impossible grace, its hull shimmering with faint blue lights. The world governments had selected a team of Earth's best minds to handle the first contact. Dr. Carter was joined by Carol Mason, the chief diplomat, and 5 other specialists from different fields. "Are you ready for this, Alan?" Carol asked, her voice steady despite the historic moment unfolding before them. He nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." The alien delegation arrived in a smaller vessel that docked smoothly with the space station. The humans waited in the meeting chamber, hearts racing with a mix of fear and excitement. The door slid open, and the aliens entered. They called themselves the Collective. Their leader was High Administrator Zix-Tar, a tall being with smooth gray skin and 4 arms. His eyes were large and entirely black, showing no pupils or whites. When he spoke, his voice came through the translation devices as calm and measured. "We greet the inhabitants of Sol 3, Zix-Tar said. "The Collective has observed your world for some time." Carol stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth, we welcome you. We hope this meeting marks the beginning of friendship between our peoples." The aliens seemed pleasant enough at first. They shared information about their confederation of 23 species spanning hundreds of star systems. They spoke of technological marvels, interstellar travel, and peaceful coexistence. But as the days turned into weeks, Dr. Carter began to notice strange patterns in their behavior. The aliens conducted tests on the human representatives. They measured reaction times, problem-solving abilities, and emotional responses. At first, it seemed like normal scientific curiosity, but their questions became increasingly strange. "Would you say your species acts more on instinct or reason?" one alien asked Alan during a private conversation. "Both, like most intelligent beings," he replied. The alien made a note on its device. "Interesting." Carol noticed it too. During diplomatic talks, the aliens would sometimes exchange glances when humans spoke, as if sharing a private joke. "They're dismissive," Carol told Alan one night in the station's dining area. "Have you noticed? They ask us questions, but they don't really listen to our answers." Alan nodded. "It's like they've already made up their minds about something." By the 4th week, the human team had shared extensive information about Earth culture, society, and technology. The aliens had been generous with some knowledge, but strangely guarded about others. Then came the day of the announcement. The human team gathered in the meeting chamber. High Administrator Zix-Tar stood before them, flanked by his assistants. "We have completed our assessment," he stated. "According to the unified standards of the Collective, we have classified Sol 3, what you call Earth, and its dominant species." Alan felt a strange chill run down his spine. "The species known as humans has been classified as non-sapient fauna," Zix-Tar continued, his voice showing no emotion. "Your world will be designated as a wildlife preserve under collective protection." Shocked silence filled the room. "What do you mean, non-sapient?" Carol finally asked, her voice tight with controlled anger. "We've shown you our art, our science, our literature. We're having this conversation right now." Zix-Tar tilted his head slightly. "Your behaviors are impressive for non-sapient life. Many animals display complex behaviors, but our criteria for sapience are clear and standardized across the galaxy. You simply do not qualify." Ellen stepped forward. "This is absurd. By what criteria?" "The decision is final," Zix-Tar interrupted. We will begin conservation protocols immediately. This is a great honor. Your species will be preserved and protected." The human team looked at each other in disbelief. They weren't being welcomed as equals. They were being classified as animals. 6 months had passed since the collective delivered their verdict. Earth was in chaos. Captain Lisa Brooks stood on the bridge of the U.S. Endeavour, watching through the viewscreen as the shimmering barrier formed around Earth's orbit. The collective ships hovered nearby, their engines glowing softly against the darkness of space. "They're really doing it," her first officer said quietly. "They're caging us in." Lisa nodded, her jaw tight. Like animals in a zoo. The collective had announced Earth as a wildlife preserve the day before. Their ships arrived in the hundreds, deploying what they called conservation technology. The barrier would prevent unauthorized space travel and, according to the aliens, protect humanity from harmful outside influences. Down on Earth, people gathered around screens in homes, offices, and public squares as the news spread. Panic took hold in some places. Riots broke out in major cities. Military forces worldwide went on high alert, but Earth's weapons were useless against the advanced alien technology. In a small, windowless room at Global Intelligence Headquarters, Sam Winters stared at his computer screen. As a junior analyst, he shouldn't have had access to the classified files he was reading. But in the confusion of the past 6 months, security protocols had loosened. "This can't be right," he muttered to himself. The document detailed the collective's true intentions. They weren't just classifying humans as non-sapient out of some misunderstanding. There were benefits to this classification, resources they could take, experiments they could perform, all under the guise of conservation. Sam copied the files to a secure drive and slipped it into his pocket. He needed to get this information to someone who could use it. At the North American Space Agency, Dr. Alan Carter had turned his office into a war room. The walls were covered with notes, diagrams, and photos of the collective representatives. He had spent months analyzing their sapience criteria, trying to understand their logic. His assistant knocked on the door. "Dr. Carter, you need to see this." She handed him a tablet showing a live broadcast. A collective official was addressing the world from a platform in New York. "The conservation program begins today," the alien announced. "For your protection, space travel beyond your lunar body is now restricted. Certain technological advancements will be monitored and regulated. This is for your own good." Alan threw the tablet onto his desk in frustration. "They're treating us like children." "Or pets," his assistant added. The collective had already started setting up outposts on Mars and several moons in the solar system. They called them research stations and conservation monitoring points. But everyone knew they were really control centers. Later that evening, Alan sat alone in his lab, reviewing his notes on the collective's sapience assessment. Something wasn't adding up. Their criteria included specific brain structures, communication patterns, and problem-solving approaches. Humans had failed almost every category, not because they lacked intelligence, but because their intelligence was fundamentally different from the collective standard. "That's it," Alan whispered as realization dawned. "They're not measuring sapience. They're measuring similarity to themselves." He grabbed his phone and dialed Carol Mason, who had returned to her diplomatic office after the disastrous first contact. "Carol, I found the flaw in their assessment," he said when she answered. "They've created a test that only beings like them can pass. It's not about intelligence. It's about thinking the way they do." "Can we use this?" she asked. "I think so, but we need more information about how their minds work." As they spoke, the collective ships continued to deploy their barrier. From space, Earth now looked like a planet inside a faint blue bubble, a preserved specimen in the collective's galactic collection. In homes across the world, anger replaced fear as the reality of humanity's new status sank in. They weren't partners or even conquered subjects. They were classified fauna, deemed incapable of true thought or self-determination. The mistake the collective had made would prove costly. They had judged humanity as non-sapient. They would learn just how wrong they were. 2 years had passed since Earth became a wildlife preserve. On the surface, many humans appeared to accept their fate. They went to work, came home, and lived under the watchful eyes of collective observers. But beneath this calm exterior, something was brewing. In an abandoned salt mine deep below Detroit, Jack Howard paced back and forth. The former Navy SEAL had hard eyes and a scar that ran from his temple to his jaw. Around him sat 30 men and women, each chosen for their special skills. The collective thinks we're just animals, Jack said. That makes them careless. We can use that. This was just one of dozens of resistance cells Jack had established across all continents. They called themselves the Underground Sapience Alliance, or USA for short, a small joke that kept spirits up during dark times. Meanwhile, in a secret lab beneath Stanford University, Dr. Olivia Chen worked tirelessly. Her specialty was quantum physics, and for 18 months she had focused on one goal: finding a way through the collective's barrier. "Try the new frequency," she told her assistant. They fired a small probe at the miniature version of the barrier they had created. For a second, the probe seemed to pass through before it sparked and fell to the floor. Olivia smiled. Progress. The resistance wasn't just on Earth. Using old emergency protocols and ships hidden before the barrier went up, humans had established bases on Mars and Europa. These bases were small and carefully hidden from collective monitoring systems. On Mars, inside a cave system that the collective sensors couldn't penetrate, 50 scientists and soldiers worked to understand alien technology. They had managed to salvage parts from damaged collective vessels and were slowly reverse engineering them. Back on Earth, in a small apartment in Singapore, Paul Rivera stared at 6 computer screens. Paul was the best hacker humanity had to offer, and he had spent months trying to break into collective communication systems. Tonight, he finally succeeded. "I'm in," he whispered to himself as alien data streamed across his screens. Paul's eyes widened as he began to translate the information. The collective hadn't just classified humans as non-sapient. They had classified 27 other species across the galaxy the same way. All were now living on preserves like Earth. He immediately sent this information through the Resistance's secure network. In Washington, D.C., inside a secret room beneath the old Library of Congress, the leaders of the USA received Paul's message. "This changes everything," Carol Mason said, looking at the data. She had gone from diplomat to resistance leader. Her diplomatic skills now focused on uniting human efforts worldwide. Dr. Alan Carter nodded. "We're not alone. There are others like us out there." Jack Howard saw the military implications immediately. "If we can contact these other species, we might be able to form an alliance. First, we need to understand why the collective is doing this," Alan said. "What do they gain from classifying so many species as non-sapient?" The answer came 3 days later when Paul hacked deeper into the collective's database. The classified species all shared one thing: they thought differently than the collective. Their brains worked in ways the collective couldn't understand, so they were deemed less than fully conscious. It's fear, Ellen realized. They're afraid of minds that work differently from theirs. This knowledge spread through resistance cells worldwide. Humanity now understood what they were fighting for: not just freedom, but recognition of their unique form of consciousness. In response, the USA developed a new strategy. They would capture a collective official for questioning. They needed to understand the enemy better if they were going to defeat them. Jack assembled a special team for this mission. They would target a lower-ranking collective member who visited Earth's surface occasionally to check on conservation efforts. The resistance was no longer just hiding and studying. They were ready to act. As night fell over the collective outpost in what was once Yellowstone National Park, 5 shadows moved silently through the trees. The hunt had begun. The basement was cold and dimly lit. Dr. Alan Carter paced nervously, while his assistant Kate Williams checked the restraints on their prisoner. The alien sat quietly in a specially designed chair, its 4 eyes blinking slowly. "Are you sure this will work?" Kate asked. Alan nodded. "The sedative should keep it calm but aware. We don't want to hurt it. We just need answers." The captured alien was a low-ranking official from the collective, responsible for monitoring wildlife in what used to be Canada. Jack's team had taken it 3 days ago in a perfect operation with no witnesses. Ellen pulled up a chair and sat across from the alien. "We want to understand the collective's classification system. Why are we considered non-sapient?" The alien tilted its head. "You are speaking to me as if you expect me to understand complex concepts. Interesting behavior for fauna. We can speak, build cities, create art, and explore space. How are we not sapient?" Kate demanded. "Vocal mimicry and tool use are common in lesser species," the alien replied. "Many animals build structures. Some even use simple tools. This does not indicate true consciousness." Over the next several hours, Alan and Kate questioned the alien. Slowly, the truth began to emerge. The collective's sapience criteria were entirely based on their own biology and thought patterns. "Your brains process information incorrectly," the alien explained. "You rely on emotions. You make intuitive leaps. True sapient thought is logical, structured, and follows proper pathways." "Proper according to whom?" Alan asked. "According to universal standards established by the founding species of the collective, of course." Meanwhile, in a secure facility under Chicago, Andrew Peters worked with a team of linguists. Andrew was the world's leading xenolinguist, specializing in understanding alien languages and communication. For weeks, they had been decoding the complete collective taxonomy system from data Paul had stolen. Today, they made a breakthrough. "It's all here," Andrew told the Resistance. 5 years had passed since Earth was classified as a wildlife preserve. The collective believed they had humans safely contained and controlled. They were wrong. Deep beneath the surface of the moon, in a base hidden from collective sensors, 200 of Earth's best minds gathered in a large meeting room. The walls were covered with maps, diagrams, and images of collective outposts throughout the solar system. Commander Eric Fuller stood at the front of the room. He was tall with short. The Titan outpost gleamed under Saturn's dim light. Its silver domes and tall towers stood out against the orange landscape. Inside, collective officials monitored Earth and the other wildlife preserves across the galaxy. None of them noticed the 10 small shapes moving through the darkness toward the main control center. Commander Eric Fuller led his team across Titan's rocky surface. Their special suits masked their heat signatures and muffled their movements. Each person carried a small backpack containing equipment for their specific task. Approaching entry point, Eric whispered into his comm, "All teams report." One by one, the other 9 teams confirmed they were in position around the outpost. "Remember," Eric said, "we're not here to fight unless necessary. Plant the device and get out." They reached a maintenance hatch at the base of the central dome. Using tools developed by Dr. Chen, they bypassed the security system and slipped inside. Meanwhile, in Earth orbit, Paul Rivera initiated his cyber attack. From his mountain base, he sent signals that bounced from hidden relay stations throughout the solar system. These signals flooded collective networks with contradictory information, paradoxes, emotional reasoning, intuitive leaps, and other thought patterns the collective found difficult to process. Alarms blared across collective ships as their systems struggled to make sense of the data. "What's happening?" demanded a high-ranking official on the command ship. "Unknown data corruption," answered a technician. "Systems are showing multiple logic errors." Back on Titan, Eric's team moved through the corridors of the outpost. They encountered few collective members. Most were busy dealing with the system failures caused by Paul's attack. They reached the central computer room. 2 guards stood at the entrance, looking confused as their communication devices filled with static. "Now," Eric ordered. His team released small drones that filled the air with a special gas. The guards fell unconscious without raising an alarm. Inside the computer room, Dr. Chen's assistant, a young engineer named Mike Dawson, approached the main terminal. From his backpack, he removed the paradigm shifter, a small silver device that represented 5 years of research and development. "Remember, it needs to connect directly to their main processing unit," Eric said. Mike nodded and opened the access panel. With steady hands, he connected the device to the collective system. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the screens around them flickered and changed. The collective writing rearranged itself into new patterns. "It's working," Mike whispered in awe. "The system is adapting to human neural patterns." In orbit around Saturn, Kevin Ross led the stealth fleet out of hiding. The Defiance and 9 other ships moved toward the barrier control satellites. "All ships target the barrier nodes," Kevin ordered. "Fire only when I give the command." The ships positioned themselves around the massive satellites that projected the containment barrier around Earth. These satellites were the physical manifestation of humanity's prison. "We have confirmation," said Kevin's second-in-command. "The paradigm shifter is active. Collective systems are vulnerable." "All ships, fire," Kevin ordered. Beams of energy shot from the human ships, striking the barrier nodes. The nodes, confused by the signals from the compromised main system on Titan, didn't activate their defenses in time. One by one, the nodes exploded in silent bursts of light and debris. On Earth, people looked up to see the faint blue shimmer of the barrier flicker and vanish. At the same time, Dr. Carter and Kate Williams approached a collective diplomatic vessel in a small shuttle. They had requested a formal meeting under the guise of submitting new wildlife data. "We are here to present evidence," Alan announced as they entered the ship's meeting room. He placed a data crystal on the table before the stunned collective representatives. "Evidence of what?" asked the lead alien. "Of our sapience," Kate replied. "By your own foundational laws, not just your current classification system." The collective officials looked at each other in confusion. Their communication devices were filled with reports of system failures across their network. The humans they had classified as non-sapient fauna were somehow dismantling their technology. Throughout the solar system, the first strike of Operation Cognitive Dissonance unfolded with precision and coordination. Humanity had just landed their first blow for freedom and recognition. The Great Hall of the Collective Governing Council buzzed with angry voices. 200 representatives from 23 species sat in tiered seats around a central platform. Emergency lights flashed on the walls, signaling the crisis status of the meeting. High Administrator Sixt Tor stood on the platform, facing the hostile crowd. "How could this happen?" demanded a representative from the mock species. "How could non-sapient fauna disable our systems across an entire sector?" Zixtar raised all 4 of his hands, calling for quiet. "The situation is under control. Our forces are moving to restore the barrier around Sol 3. The barrier that primitive humans somehow destroyed." Another representative shouted. On screens around the hall, reports continued to stream in. The paradigm shifter technology had spread beyond Titan. Collective systems across 3 sectors were showing signs of accepting human neural patterns as valid. The classification system itself was beginning to flag inconsistencies in its own logic. Meanwhile, Earth's Unified Defense Forces, now under the command of Kyle Morris, positioned their fleets at key points throughout the solar system. For 5 years, they had built ships in secret, hiding them in asteroid belts and on the dark sides of moons. "All units in position," reported his second-in-command. "The collective reinforcements will arrive in 3 hours." Kyle nodded. "By then, it'll be too late." The paradigm shifter technology was spreading to other non-sapient worlds. On 27 planets across the galaxy, classified species were rising up as their collective watchers lost control of their systems. On Naraxis, a world of blue oceans and white beaches, the fish-like Krell disabled the collective outpost that had monitored them for centuries. On Desert Tumar, the The six-legged Vosh broke through their barrier for the first time. Everywhere, the denied species were claiming their freedom. Back in the council hall, a delegation of Vexteri representatives approached the central platform. "The system has failed," announced Zorvex. "Our foundational laws require us to recognize evidence of sapience when presented. The humans have provided such evidence." "They used violence," Zix Par countered. "They attacked our installations after we imprisoned them and denied their personhood." Zorvex replied calmly. "How would you respond to such treatment?" The council erupted into shouting again. Factions formed quickly, those who insisted on maintaining the old classification system and those who recognized its failure. On Earth, Susan Davis prepared for her new role. Once a junior diplomat, she was now Earth's chief representative to the galaxy. Her office in the old United Nations building had been quickly converted into a command center. "The Collective Council is in emergency session," her aide reported. 3 member species have formally announced they're breaking away: the Vexteri, the Nell, and the Thama. They've recognized human sapience and are offering alliance. Susan nodded. "Send our acceptance, and prepare the reparations demand for the full collective." The demand was simple but powerful: formal recognition of human sapience, removal of all monitoring outposts from the solar system, and compensation for the years of restricted development. In orbit around Mars, Dr. Carter watched as collective ships retreated from their positions. The paradigm shifter had worked better than anyone expected. Not only had it forced collective systems to recognize human thought patterns, but it had also revealed the flaws in the collective's own thinking. "They're leaving," Kate said, standing beside him at the viewport. "Not running away," Alan corrected. "Regrouping. This isn't over yet." He was right. High Administrator Zixtar wasn't ready to admit defeat. In the council hall, he called for a vote to declare the humans dangerous rogue fauna that needed to be contained by any means necessary. But before the vote could take place, a new message appeared on the council screens. It came simultaneously from all 27 formerly classified worlds, plus Earth. It contained only 5 words: "We are sapient. Recognize us." The message was followed by detailed scans showing how the brains of all these different species processed information, each unique, each valid, each demonstrating consciousness in its own way. The council fell silent as they watched the evidence unfold before them. The age of denial was coming to an end.